On Death, Sex, and Money, we feature interviews with you, our community of listeners, getting honest about uncomfortable things.
I developed an illness where it isn't safe for me to drive. A friend once said to me, "Sex is like air. You don't think about it until you're not getting enough." This is a similar sort of thing if you just replace sex with driving.
Listen to Death, Sex, and Money wherever you get podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by Stars. Lisa Tadeo's best-selling book is about to become your favorite new show. Based on a true story, the new Stars original series 3 Women stars Shailene Woodley as Gia, a grieving and struggling writer who embarks on a cross-country road trip where she meets 3 women determined to radically change their lives. This one is not to be missed. Watch the season premiere of 3 Women now, only on Stars and the Stars app.
Feeling overwhelmed with the constant flow of headlines and trying to keep up with the latest twist of this election year? Take a deep breath and turn on Crooked Media's What a Day podcast. In just 20 short minutes, What a Day, co-hosted by Trevor Anderson, Juanita Tolliver, Josie Duffy Rice, and Priyanka Aribindi, breaks down the biggest news stories into bite-sized pieces that don't make you want to cry. And the best part is, they do it every day. So start your day off right with What a Day, available wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to Immigrantly. I am your host, Saadia Khan. This week, in celebration of Latino Heritage Month, we are bringing you a special conversation with the brilliant Karla Cornejo Villavicencio, author of The Undocumented Americans and her fiction debut, Catalina. She's also nominated for the National Book Award, which is incredible. Our nationally producer, Sofia Sanchez, leads this thoughtful interview where they delve into Karla's first novel. The conversation also explores how her book is similar to a pop song, inspired by artists like Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodrigo, and the influence of autobiographical music, girlhood, and dark humor. Karla reflects on her transition from girlhood to womanhood, from undocumented to first-time voter, and her views on voting in the upcoming elections, and so much more. I am really excited to share this episode with you. Be sure to tune in next week for another brand new episode of Immigrantly with me. Until then, take care and enjoy.
Karla Cornejo Villavicencio, thank you so much for being here, coming on to Immigrantly podcast. It's a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me.
You are the author of The Undocumented Americans, a memoir / group of essays that came out in 2020, and now your newest book and first work of fiction is out. It's called Catalina, and throughout a lot of the promotion, it's been described as a part pop song. I want to know, what pop song, or what does that mean? How is this book a pop song?
That's a great question. If I'm not mistaken, my editor came up with that copy. I send my editor a lot of the things that inspire me, and sometimes the things that inspire me are songs. I usually listen to a lot of Taylor Swift, certain songs from Olivia Rodrigo and Billie Eilish, and these sort of young women pop singers who are writing autobiographically and who also managed to create songs with a certain kind of intensity that I feel is very young. It's very 1920. There was a sense with Olivia Rodrigo's album, the heartbreak was in someone who was so young, but they felt intensely that this was going to last forever.
But you're still a traitor.
And I liked that. You know you're wrong, but you want to be wrong because being wrong feels good. So I wanted to write a book that was about like a young person that kind of captured the intensity of listening to like a breakup album that reminds you of, when you were 16 or something.
So, they say that writers should write what they know. I know you talked about how this book is vaguely to seriously autobiographical. I mean, how do you balance writing what you know while writing fiction? What do you choose to fictionalize?
Well, everything in my book is fiction. The characters are not based on real people, but like I think all characters are sort of a composite of many scraps along the years. Like there's something real in all fiction. I definitely didn't want to write about some of my college experiences because I think a lot of it's boring, but also I get a lot of pleasure in keeping things to myself. And so there are like stories that maybe people would want to hear. I get a lot of existential pleasure out of not sharing, but I was comfortable writing up a senior year for Catalina.
Yeah. I know throughout the book, there's a lot of little sentences that hint at that people are allowed to have their secrets, that literature is much more beautiful than the real world. And something that I picked up throughout the book is that, it's a performance. And Catalina, the main character, she likes saying things that wow people or saying things that kind of make them shake their head for a second. She likes getting the reaction out of people. She also likes to pretend and play dress up with her words. Was there something you wanted to say about people walking into scripts or feeling like they have to perform things? I guess I should add that I asked this question because you've talked about how a lot of Latinas feel the need to write specific things that they know or feel like they should know. And Catalina does not want to play into that. She does not want to play into the cliche. She does not want to, even for a second. She's like control, like where she's like, I don't want to be in a situation I hate even for a second. So I feel like there's a lot of rebelling against the stereotype in every single sentence that she says. The question for you is, as a writer, as the person that was in charge of this character's life, how did you separate the Lucky Charms from the grains for her? How did you decide when she was going to maybe play into a more expected outcome or reality? And when did you decide that she was going to play pretend?
That's a really good question. Those are like really interesting observations about Catalina. I wrote someone who I imagine is a little bit like being married to a stand-up comedian or something, where sometimes you ask a yes or no question and they turn it into a bit that they try to get some wordplay in. And in this imaginary world, Catalina wants to erect a fence around her, and she can do it through words. And there's a scene where she's talking to Nathaniel, the boy toy, and he asks her questions, and she says the truth is not something that he had earned. She keeps people a little bit at a distance with not answering directly, but I think she's quite open to forming connections and being appreciated and appreciating others. And then maybe there's something that reminds her that she's an outsider and that she's not on the same level as everyone else. And then she makes a joke or she makes a remark. It's probably a way for her to protect herself. She's an orphan. She's two grandparents, but they're elderly. I think she's someone who feels herself to be a little bit fragile, standoffish, and she can do that with her words.
Can you tell me about the name Catalina? I know that in the book you mentioned that it comes from an Ecuadorian song, but are you the type of writer that gives meaning to every single character's name, or how do you decide that?
Oh boy. So Catalina, it's a Spanish song called La Catalina by Manuel Vallejo. And then Rosalía also has a cover of it. And it's just an old Spanish song I knew and had sort of grown up with. I was looking through the baby book, and there's the kind of like Spanish names that are very like Isabel Allende kind of names, like, Alejandra or whatever. And I always really felt that those girls were so lucky that they had like princess names, the names with like lots of vowels and stuff. I wanted to give my character a name that was just like a bold flower of a name, Catalina. But the song is kind of dark, and it's sort of an inappropriate. I think it's a little bit inappropriate to name your child after a song that dark, but it shows you a little bit about her family, their comfort with darkness a little bit. There's the sense of humor that she shares with her grandmother, which is very dark, very like gallows humor. It gives Catalina the illusion that she's destined for something because she was named after a song. And I think she leans into ideas about muses and rock stars and girls who inspire songs. And it all comes from this moment of anointment at birth where she was named after a song.
Were there other songs that were playing in your head as you were writing this book?
Nicki Minaj's song Barbie Dreams and the music video were both very influential for this book. It's a song
I
where
love that sentence.
Nicki for real. Nicki goes through a list of all the rappers that she's not going to sleep with and why. Every single line is just like bam, bam, bam.
Drake worth 100 million, always buying me shit, but I don't know if the pussy read the...
What's up?
Before you board your flight, where'd we get that incredible gnocchi?
Hold up. Did you just call gnocchi gnocchi?
No. You're at the airport. No way you can hear me.
Actually, with my new Galaxy Buds 3 Pro from Samsung, I can hear everything.
Now boarding.
Gotta go. I'll bring you back some gnocchi.
Tune into what matters using adaptive active noise cancellation with Galaxy AI. Get Buds 3 Pro now at Samsung.com. Galaxy AI features require compatible Samsung Galaxy phone and initial setup via Samsung Wear app.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. Time is luxury, which is why Polestar spent so much time designing the Polestar 3, their luxury electric performance SUV. It's designed to go further with up to 315 miles of range and immerse you in a unique listening experience powered by 25 speakers. Your favorite daily news podcast has never sounded better. All to make the time you spend behind the wheel of Polestar 3 the best time of your day. Book your test drive at Polestar.com.
Let's be crying this.
Both in the song and in the music video, she delivers it, one, in a funny way, and two, in a cutesy way. And I saw her sort of using this femininity and this girlishness as also a way to get away with saying some things that really intrigued me. In the video, she delivers some of her craziest lines in that like Barbie voice she does. And I just thought it was amazing. In the aftermath of that song, Nicki said that she heard from some of those rappers. And I believe she was asked, like, what about, were some people upset that they weren't in the song? She was like, yeah.
Has ever any of these people been mad at you for spitting fire at them?
I did get a call from one person. I'm not going to say who.
It was Drake.
No.
I'm just guessing.
It wasn't Drake. It was someone else.
Uh-huh.
Well, two people on that list approached me about it.
Like?
I'm not gonna snitch.
I'm not asking you to. It was.
I'm not.
Come on.
I'm not telling you.
Okay.
And I thought that was a brilliant piece of art, and a brilliant piece of art that did this whole social mischief thing, which I've been thinking about. It's pop, it's entertainment, it's fun, and it's also, I think, just incredibly sharp.
Yeah, it's funny that you use the word cutesy even now, because I remember in 2020 when you were talking about what motivated you to write The Undocumented Americans and the way that you delivered that. You said that you did not want a white suburban country club to think immigrant stories were cutesy. You wrote the antithesis almost to that. So tell me about that transition. Also, like, if there was a personal transition of how you feel you can relate in your message most strongly, or yeah, what happened there? Why did you go from not wanting to write cutesy to wanting to use a cutesy voice?
I was interested in girlhood, being a girl, what you can get away with as a girl that you can't get away with as a woman, the different performances of like girlhood and womanhood. Probably because I started writing this when I was like 32, 31. I'm 35 now. And so I was going through that sort of transition from still being considered a girl to being considered a woman. Of course, it's a spiritual transition. I realized what are the opportunities that I can seize at this age to sort of grasp for social power. Like I say in my book, it's hard to stop thinking like a prey animal. And so I'm like, okay, so I don't really have a lot of power in society. Bookstore owners know my name, but that doesn't give you a ton of capital. And so I was just like, what awaits for me in middle age? What awaits for me when I'm older? I realized that when I'm an older lady, I could get away with so much because I could just be like, excuse me, young man, and just literally ask for anything. So I'm looking forward to that. And then as a girl, I felt like you can get away with saying things sometimes. I got away with saying things in rooms of power, in rooms of adults with power, because they underestimated me, because they dismissed me, because I was small, because I was cute. And when I say I got away with, it's because I tried to see what is the performance that you expect of me and what is your response going to be to what I do right now. It's a little bit of doing a twirl for an adult. They know that they're being seen as a performing, to be displayed. I also had this experience of being this sort of 30-year-old woman where all of my essays were usually about immigration, were usually accompanied by photos of like brown migrant children looking sad. No names, and those would accompany all of my articles. And I wanted to show that those children are looking right back at you, like they're looking right back at you. Their eyes are taking everything in. Their brains are taking everything in. They're reading you up and down and noticing patterns and seeing right through you. And so it ended up being a little bit like a threat, being like, you underestimate, you think we're not looking back, you think you're narrating us in the story, but we're narrating you in the story as well, using that cutesiness to lure people in. Once they were at the theater, they had to watch my show.
It's funny. So my family is Mexican, and my mom, she kind of reminds me of the grandmother in this story because she is the silent screen star. Like she was always meant to be on stage, but really never got her chance, but still has clearly all the quip and the wit necessary. And my mom always used to tell me, like, you should know you're a kid. You need to act like you're a kid and take advantage of that. And I think that's kind of what you explained of you need to take advantage of the fact that you're being objectified a little bit and use it to your advantage and then make them watch you. I also wanted to ask you about that line that you brought up where you said it's best to not start thinking like prey. In the book, it's written in context of the grandmother character is the one that thinks like prey. Can you tell me more about where the grandmother figure came from? Because also Catalina says you're actually here to see her. Like, why were we actually here to see the grandmother?
It was a moment that Catalina said out of frustration, sadness, and bitterness. I don't agree, but I think Catalina feels a grief that I feel that it sounds like you have experience with, that a lot of us feel, of seeing our like mothers, our aunties, our grandmothers have so much that was denied to them. And we see ourselves with those opportunities, or we have an understanding of ourselves as maybe living lives that they could have had or that they should have had. And this comes in the form, I think, of this feeling of indebtedness that a lot of immigrant kids, like second generation kids, have with their parents, because we do owe them a lot. What is the price on that check? Like, how much do we actually owe them? How do we pay them back? We've been given answers that aren't satisfactory. Like, we actually can't pay them back with our grades or with our college diplomas or with our own children. We have to carry this for the rest of our lives, a lot of us. And so this is what Catalina feels when she's at parties at school. She involves her grandmother by they both plan what she's going to wear. When Catalina sees Nathaniel for the first time, she says it at that moment to her grandma. She's like, oh my God, I just saw a cute boy. There's a way in which she wants to involve her grandma and kind of give her the opportunity to live vicariously through her. I think it's interesting to see how Catalina and her grandmother navigate that. There's no use denying it. A lot of our parents came to this country, a lot of our grandparents came to this country to give us different lives, and they've succeeded. And yet, for many of us, that success feels so bitter and it tastes so bitter. What makes that happen is just so systemic. But I think examining that guilt and making it a little bit lighter is something that I am trying to do in my writing.
I recently came back from Colombia. I was spending a year teaching over there at a university, and I used the Undocumented Americans to start a book club. And one of the popular questions that I had from my students was, do I, as a Mexican American, as the daughter of two Mexican immigrants, do you feel that it's worth it to live in the US? And I always answer them with something that you actually perfectly articulated for me, which was that as a child of immigrants in the US, I feel like I'm constantly caught between living for my parents versus living for myself. And it is a sense of indebtedness that I feel to allow my parents to live through myself, which is balanced by the fact that I do want to reject the American dream and obviously not make it like, oh, this was the end all be all of life. And I guess I bring this up also because I feel like in a way, we've been talking about pop songs and we've been talking about pretending and playing dress up. There's a sense of romanticism that is motif throughout your book. And I think that's brought home when in the book you have, Mr. Hollywood, as you call him, who attempts to save the day, come into the picture, into the scene. What are you trying to say in your book? What are you trying to criticize or highlight about the US or your experience about Hollywood in the way that romanticism helps distract you or even save you sometimes?
For me growing up, being able to romanticize my own thoughts and my own mind and my own family allowed me to have a sense of dignity that was really important for me to have. I did not grow up with a lot material, but I had a big imagination, and my parents probably have big imaginations.
The one thing I want to add to this question is that it's true also that the way to actually maybe achieve the American dream in the US, the simplest way or the only way is through Hollywood. Maybe you really did make it rags to riches if you get famous. And so I do want to also recognize that reality. Why have a Mr. Hollywood character in the book?
I think Mr. Hollywood, I like how you're calling him. I think he represents someone who's liberal and earnestly interested in good things and good people and liberal progressive ideas. I think he genuinely cares about immigrants. And so what I'm trying to sort of show is the way someone even like that can kind of get it wrong. And so the moments where he gets it wrong are kind of hard to describe. It won't show up in like an anti-racist manual. I don't know if you watch K-dramas.
I haven't, no.
The male leads are such romanticized ideals of men that it feels almost instructive. Do you see how he's not killing her in a murder-suicide and he just accepted that she rejected him? Look, see, he's handsome. So I was like, look at how this perfectly wonderful, artistic white man who loves Latin America, look at what a fool he's making of himself. And look at how he's hurting someone who's trying to just be seen. And it doesn't happen in obvious ways. It's not like an obvious villain. And so I do show that this is a person who is a good guy, but his love for Latin America ends up manifesting in ways that hurt Catalina in non-obvious ways.
I feel like I've met a lot of those people who have the best of intentions, but sometimes their ambition is their folly and they end up hurting the story more than projecting it. I want to go to one of the last pages where you dedicate the book to Vanessa Guillen. Can you tell me why you decided to dedicate it to her at the end instead of at the beginning?
That's a good question. The beginning introduction, my dumbass, is for Ted and Marco.
Who know what they did.
So who know what they did. Obviously, I was referring to Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and their records during the events that I narrate in the book during this period of 2010 about immigration reform on everything, including women's rights. And also the way that they have chosen to live their lives as Latino American citizens. So it was that. It was a dedication as a way of looking someone right in the eyes.
Feeling overwhelmed with the constant flow of headlines and trying to keep up with the latest twist of this election year? Take a deep breath and turn on Crooked Media's What a Day podcast. In just 20 short minutes, What a Day, co-hosted by Trevor Anderson, Juanita Tolliver, Josie Duffy Rice, and Priyanka Aribindi, breaks down the biggest news stories into bite-sized pieces that don't make you want to cry. And the best part is, they do it every day. So start your day off right with What a Day, available wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
And then it ends with Vanessa Guillen as a true, sincere, on my part, monument and tribute for her, thinking of this as my book that I wanted to have sort of a physical memorial for her. You know, it has never occurred to me to dedicate my books to my parents or to my partner, because that feels like a kind of idolatry or something weird. I don't like it. But I wanted to say my piece, and my piece to them was fuck you. And my piece to her was like, you deserved the world. And the book is in so many ways about violence against women. And Catalina is working on a thesis about feminicide and Ciudad Juarez. And there's a lot in the book about the way women are objectified and are treated like objects or specimens or statistics and so it felt important to have something to back myself up when I move through the world and I'm like, you know, we are deserving of everything.
Yeah. When I was reading this book, I felt like it was in conversation or reminded me a lot of My Body by Emily Ratajkowski. Have you read that by any chance? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like she talks...
I love that book.
Yeah, me too. I think that she does a really good job articulating what it is to be a muse and not be given like proper respect for it. But I think that Catalina, without ever having seen her, you're able to understand why she's a muse to herself, is dissociated throughout the book and is performing as well, as we talked about. Was there a book for you that you feel like was in conversation with this one, or...
So many. I think John Berger's Ways of Seeing was probably most influential because it's all about the object and being looked at and being aware of being looked at. And it talks about gender and it talks about art. Catalina, at some point, captures the attention of Nathaniel, the boy. She doesn't know what to do with it. She's like, I had his attention and now I didn't know what to do with it. Nathaniel was looking at me and I was looking at myself being looked at. And so I think that kind of that is the heart of the novel, right? How Catalina sees herself as the subject and the protagonist of her story, and literally everyone around her treats her like an object. And she's fighting it. So we see her in that fight during 1 year. But, the way that I end the novel, I'm not letting it clear. I'm not suggesting that this stops. Yeah. I'm not suggesting that any of this stops. This is a year. And so it was important to not deceive the readers or to accommodate maybe the desires of people who wanted her to have like a poetic justice ending. She doesn't get that. A lot of us don't get that. So, but I do think I end the book triumphantly, even if I don't give her a green card and a meeting with the president at the end.
I hate to ask you this after the book just came out. Is it a sequel in the works by any chance?
So here's the thing. I kind of want to say that I'm going to retire so that then I can come back, and because I managed to stay in people's goodwill because my first book, one, I was undocumented. Two, my second book was another debut. Like, you kind of had to be a little bit easier on me. And then for the third one, I'm coming back after retirement.
You're like Lizzo. You can just put "I quit" on Instagram and then come back like a week later. I would read it. And you could use that in the copy. So I think that could work.
Oh, fantastic. Yes, I'm retiring.
Okay. I got it here first. This is my exclusive. I wanted to ask you, I know you said that you wouldn't really talk about your personal life during this press tour, so it's okay if you can't answer this, but there's a sentence in the book where you talk about how Catalina acknowledges that she's, at the end of the day, the type of person that would apply to Harvard. And so as like rebellious as she is, as much as she doesn't want to, be in a situation she hates for even a second, as much as she uses every sentence to make institutions uncomfortable. I also thought of like, you are like that as well, where, I like, you say things sometimes that make people just obviously think, but also sometimes things that are a little bit socially inappropriate. And,
Oh, are we talking about my autism?
Oh, I didn't know you were autistic.
No, keep going. You're literally just describing autism, but yes, keep going.
Well, I was wondering, like you're at the same time, we have to unpack that. You have to unpack that when you answer. But but you're all at the same time very much, you're like a bad girl, but you're also a good girl that applies to Harvard and has the grades to get into Harvard and does all the things to be at Harvard or Yale. So how do you balance wanting to go against the status quo, but also, I don't know, be great, TM?
Thank you. That's really sweet. Yes. So I do say socially inappropriate things because I can't call it that. So I will say one way to answer that is that just by existing and wanting and to protect my values and principles, which for me are like my independence, my bodily autonomy, my peace of mind. Like, in order to pursue those and protect those, I end up just naturally going against a lot of social norms and society expectations. And I'm comfortable doing that because those are very important values for me. That's the path on which I find myself in life. I do a lot of therapy. I read a lot. I try to have a quiet life. And I think I do seek stability and safety and healing and all of that. But I am able to cause quite a lot of chaos. And those are just true things about me. I would say that I'm a very kind person, and I am really sensitive. I'm very quiet, and I'm actually in person quite shy and quiet. But I can do things in my writing that the truth is I can do those things in real life too. I get into fights and stuff. I do think it's a little bit the autism because I'm like just really, I think I'm like really sweet and like just honestly drawing watercolors, painting watercolors of frogs over and over. But then if I hear someone say something transphobic, I'm like throwing my soup in someone's face because I'm like, those are my principles. So I am a little bit morally rigid. And so that ends up getting me into fight sometimes, or just, I stand up for myself a lot. And because standing up for myself, because I'm brown, because I'm queer, because I'm a woman without children, because all of those things, standing up for myself often ends up just going against social norms. You know what I think? Do you know Sanrio characters? Who's the little one in the leather jacket, the little penguin in the leather jacket? I think that's me. Like just a little bit cute, a little bit has a criminal record.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's interesting how you very much do stick it to institutions, but you're also successful in the eyes of white institutions, the top institutions. So I understand how that dichotomy can exist, but it's just interesting to me how you do it. You tend to come out with books during election years. So you maybe you want to come out of your retirement in like 2028 just to keep it consistent, like Adele or something.
Let's say 2020. Yes, let's do that. Oh my God, yeah.
And last time in 2020, before we knew that Trump was going to win, you said on election night, I think you were going to get like all of your jewels, like a character or like a person on Titanic,
not my jewels.
All your jewels, all your furs, and you were you're creating a metaphor out of like a passenger on Titanic. This time, we're now in 2024, heading into another election, and I'm just wondering how you feel this time, if you still feel like you need to gather all of your furs and your jewels. And
so I am constantly in a state of grabbing my furs and my jewels, so to speak. Honestly, I'm reading a lot about fascism. I try to understand people. Human behavior is very confusing to me. Some of the dynamics that are laid bare in political discourse do animate me whenever I see anything that feels sort of fascistic, which I see everywhere. I see fascism everywhere. I'm like, that typeface, fascism. Like, I'm like, that Instagram filter, fascism. Because I grew up with again, my parents grew up under a dictatorship, and I grew up around lots of stories about Latin American politics. And so the idea of they've taken over the Capitol, the senators have fled, the military has now installed itself. It's very real to me. It's something that has always felt almost inevitable. And I think that has to do with sort of like family trauma. Mm-hmm. But so I'm constantly in a state of I'm not like a survivalist or anything. And I think growing up undocumented has resulted in another thing which I have, which is if you told me just walk out of your house, you have to leave everything. In order to feel safe, I need to know that I can sort of exist without my phone, without my credit card, without an ID. And if I feel like I'm depending too much on permanence, on feeling too comfortable having a home, or I flip out a little bit. Mm-hmm. I need to be ready to go. That's psychological. And so, yes, for someone who's as worried as I am about authoritarian and governments and repression, I am very scared about what's going to happen in November.
In the last election year, you were still undocumented, and now this will be the first presidential election where you can vote, right? Mm-hmm. And since this will be your first presidential election, I'm curious to know, how are you feeling?
I mean, the lesser of two evils has been my life. I'm okay, so who? I mean, that's our parents. That's our grandparents. It's you have to go to see your aunt for vacation. It's I mean, we have to choose the lesser of two evils all the time. My honest thoughts on voting have to do with my thoughts on democracy and the American dream. And this is as someone who has, for some weird reason, I feel like has survived so much and has been ushered into safety in so many different scenarios. Now that I have citizenship, I just remember what it felt like to, one, not have citizenship for most of my life, and to have seen things and not being able to know that I couldn't call the police, like watching someone get beaten and knowing that it was unsafe for my family to call. And I remember what it was like to go onto a Chinatown bus, knowing that they were checking for papers on the Amtrak trains. Just these really small details of sort of terror in my life as an undocumented person, that having rights, not just God-given rights, but state-given rights, is something that I just plan on using until it's stripped from me. And so you won't find me chanting USA. You won't find me at a convention. I don't put my faith into the hands of politicians, but it also just is not something I would personally do, to not vote, knowing that there are authoritarian people who want to steal our votes and who are doing everything they can to repress the votes of African Americans and are trying to disenfranchise people. Like, that makes me just want to not help them. I don't want to help make their job easier. If I do also have no interest in lecturing people who feel like it's against their conscience to vote, because I feel like in a democracy, you also have that right. You have a right to withhold your vote, or to withhold your vote until you feel like your representatives are listening to you. That's entirely valid.
In another interview, you said that oftentimes people who interview you will be asking you questions or clearly seeing you through a sociological lens where, they can't help but ask things about your citizenship status or the way that, you came from Ecuador and your life and the way that your brain formed as a result. And maybe I've done a little bit of that, so I apologize. But your story is inextricably tied to the things that you write. And we've talked about that. How do you wish, we were talking about perception and we were talking about being objectified, but how do you wish people saw you, or how do you wish people would see you?
I wish people wouldn't see me. I wish they would love me, but not see me or know me or learn about me. I think that that's a very push-pull thing that a lot of us have in our relationships with the world. Like, we want to be loved and seen for the reasons we love and see ourselves. And sometimes when you are loved for reasons that you don't love about yourself, it doesn't feel good, right? So I honestly want to just be respected for my writing. And I want people to think I'm beautiful. And I generally want to be left alone. But when people do write about me, I mean, there are some things I like. I like when women of color are given the opportunity to engage with my work, and reviews of my work are not assigned to white men, honestly. They can appreciate the language, but they're not going to understand the subtext. And a lot of my writing is very surgical. It's very subtext based. I always have much more interesting conversations like with you, someone who's read my books and just has questions about them. And it honestly seems so simple, but sometimes people don't read my stuff and want to ask about my parents and my relationship with them. And so they will have not touched Catalina and will be like, so you and your mom, do you have a relationship that's less like mother and daughter and more like sisters? And you're like, what? What? Tyra, like, this is so inappropriate. And so I'm not asking for much. I'm asking for a good conversation with someone that I don't have to explain like Don Omar to, and who has enough in common with me that they're not trying to not see me as like a, random weirdo alien. I look like people you're friends with. You're not like, oh my God, you don't know your grandparents. So yeah, that's all I want. Don't ask for much.
Thank you. Really quick thing, I asked this to all the New Yorkers that I have had the pleasure of interviewing. And what is your bodega order, and does it include an orange drink?
Okay, so I have found a deli in New Haven that makes a turkey sandwich on a hard roll that is similar to the turkey on a hard roll that I grew up with. It is turkey on a hard roll with American cheese and mayo, and ideally toasted.
Okay.
So that feels like a very basic answer, but look, I'm okay with basic. I'm okay with mayonnaise and beige. Like, I'm fine with that. And I really miss and love bodega coffee because they know how to make it right, light and sweet, which is how, when you order a coffee, when you say this is a regular coffee, this is what it means. It means half and half, or milk, and like 10 packets of sugar. It means you hold the sugar for 10 seconds. That is what a regular coffee means. So
10 seconds?
So yeah. Okay. I guess it depends on how like jammed the spout is in the sugar dispenser. Right. See, this is why it's a very specific order.
It could be 15.
Or could be 4. Like, if it's just really... Yeah, no, it's definitely not 4. It's 10.
Karla, thank you so much for coming on to Immigrantly. I so appreciated my conversation with you, and I'm genuinely looked forward to talking to you for a very long time. You're in my thoughts a lot, and not the thoughts and prayers type of way, but you inspire me, and I really appreciate your words.
That really means a lot to me, and I could tell that you did your homework. This means a lot to me to have my work being taken so seriously, and your questions were lovely.
Thank you, Karla.
To our listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Immigrantly today. The show is produced by Saadia Khan. This episode was written, researched, and guest hosted by me, Sofia Sanchez. Editorial review is by Shay Yu. Sound design and editing is by Juan Velez. Theme music is by Simon Hutchinson, and other music is from Epidemic Sound. Once again, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week.